Something changes when you stop being constantly available, not just for others, for yourself. When the noise of other people's presence, expectations, and perception of you goes quiet, something in the silence begins to speak that could not be heard before. Not the version of you that exists in relation to others, the version that exists when no one is watching, and that version has things to say that the social version never had room for. If the idea of finding that version of yourself is both exciting and slightly terrifying, hit like, this one is for you. Here's the thing about constant social presence that nobody names directly. It is a continuous act of translation. Every moment you are in the social field, being perceived, being responded to, adjusting your presentation based on the feedback the environment is returning, you are translating yourself into a language the audience can receive, not lying, not performing in a cynical sense, simply rendering a version of yourself that is legible to the context. And the longer you do this, the more fluent you become in the translation, and the further the original language gets from daily use. Think of resonance. When you strike a tuning fork, it vibrates at its natural frequency, the specific rate of oscillation that is built into its physical structure. But place that tuning fork near another object vibrating at a different frequency and something happens. The tuning fork begins to be pulled toward the external frequency. Not immediately, not completely, but incrementally through the physics of proximity and vibration. The natural frequency is influenced, displaced, adjusted. Now move the tuning fork away from the external frequency. Let it vibrate alone. And gradually, it returns to itself, to the specific oscillation that is structurally its own. Most people living in constant social proximity are vibrating at frequencies that are not entirely theirs. Not because anyone forced them, because the physics of proximity makes some degree of entrainment inevitable. Your natural frequency, the specific way you think, respond, feel, and move when no external frequency is pulling at you, is only fully audible when the entraining frequencies are removed. The disappearance is the removal. The finding is the return to the natural oscillation. Carl Jung spent years mapping what he called the shadow, the parts of the self that are pushed out of conscious awareness, because they are incompatible with the social persona we maintain. The ambitions that felt inappropriate to voice, the reactions that seemed unacceptable to express, the preferences that contradicted the role we played in the social world. These parts do not disappear when they are excluded from the social performance. They go underground. They continue to exert influence from below the surface. And when the performance stops, when you disappear from the social field long enough for the persona to relax, they begin to surface. Not always comfortably, not always in forms you will immediately recognize as yourself, but unmistakably alive and unmistakably yours. The disappearance from others is not a loss of self. It is the removal of the entrained frequencies, and the self that begins to emerge in the silence is not a new self. It is a self that was always there, vibrating at a frequency that could not be heard over the noise of constant social translation. And this is where it gets deeper. There are specific ways the self-finding begins to reveal itself, precise moments that tell you the natural frequency is returning. If you recognize any of these, understand what they are pointing to. The first is noticing that certain relationships existed only because you kept initiating and have gone quiet since you stopped. You pulled back from the social field deliberately or gradually, and in the withdrawal you discovered something about the structure of your connections that was invisible while you were inside them. Some relationships require your constant maintenance to exist. Not because the other person is indifferent, because the connection was built on your output rather than on genuine mutual pull. When you stopped generating the output, the silence confirmed what the noise had been covering. This is not a failure of those relationships. It is accurate information about what they were built on. And accurate information, however uncomfortable, is always more useful than the comfortable fiction that constant availability was creating. The second is realizing mid-conversation that you are performing a version of yourself you haven't checked in with in a long time. You are speaking, and you hear yourself, the patterns, the positions, the register, and you notice that what is coming out was last calibrated to a version of your life that may no longer be accurate. The social self has been running on an older firmware. It has been presenting a you that reflects who you were when the people around you formed their impression, not necessarily who you are now. The mid-conversation recognition is not a crisis. It is the natural frequency beginning to notice the gap between itself and the version being expressed. The third is finding that the version of you that shows up in solitude has stronger opinions than the one that shows up around people. Alone, you know exactly what you think. You have preferences that are clear, positions that are firm, reactions that are immediate and unedited. In companies, these same opinions arrive softer, more qualified, more responsive to the reactions of the people you are with. The gap between your solitude opinions and your social opinions is the measure of the degree to which the proximity of others is pulling your natural frequency towards something more palatable. The gap is not hypocrisy. It is the physics of social presence. But the solitude opinions are the real ones. And the more you disappear, the louder they become. The fourth is becoming aware of preferences, tastes, and reactions that you did not know you had until you stopped filtering them through others' responses. In the absence of the social audience, you discover that you have stronger aesthetic preferences than you expressed, that you are drawn to things you never mentioned because they did not fit the legible version of yourself, that you have reactions to experiences, beauty, ugliness, meaning, absurdity, that never made it into the social translation because they were too specific, too intense, or simply too private to render for a general audience. These undeclared preferences are not peripheral to who you are. They are the most accurate data about it. But here is what no one tells you about what comes next. Here is what nobody tells you about finding yourself in the silence. The self you find is not always immediately comfortable to meet. Not because it is damaged or broken or worse than the social version, because it has been waiting for a long time with a particular quality of honesty that the social version was not permitted to have. And the first thing an honest self does when it finally has room to speak is say the things that have been accumulating while it waited. It will tell you about the needs that went unmet while you were busy meeting everyone else's. It will surface the resentments that were managed rather than resolved, the small betrayals absorbed without acknowledgement, the years of accommodation that asked nothing in return. It will present the ambitions that were quietly shelved because they seemed large, too selfish, or too incompatible with the role you were playing. It will name the relationships that cost more than they returned. It will have opinions about your life that the social version was not permitted to voice. Jung wrote, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego, not a comfortable encounter, not a pleasant reunion with a better version of yourself, a confrontation with the fullness of what you are, including the parts that are inconvenient, uncomfortable, and that will require real change to integrate. The self you find in the disappearance is not a reward for good behavior. It is the complete version of you, unedited by social necessity. And the complete version is always more demanding than the curated one. Here is something to do right now. Think of one thing you want that you have not said out loud to anyone in your life. Not because it is shameful, but because the social version of yourself decided it was too much to express. Just acknowledge it, not to act on it immediately. Simply to let the waiting self know you heard it. That acknowledgement is the first moment of genuine contact between the social self and the real one. It is the beginning of the integration. The self that has been waiting is not your enemy. It is the part of you that refused to disappear entirely into the performance. It is the most loyal thing about you. And it is still there, exactly where you left it, waiting for you to finally come home. This is when everything begins to shift. You came into this video having already started. The disappearance is not something you are considering. It is something that is already happening. The social field has been thinning. The presence you used to offer constantly has been withdrawing, and something in you has been both unsettled by this and quietly, undeniably relieved. The relief is the natural frequency beginning to return. The unsettlement is the social self, recognizing that the entrainment is loosening, that the familiar pull of proximity is weakening and generating the appropriate alarm for a system that has relied on external frequency for a long time. Both of these responses are accurate, both belong, and neither of them is a reliable guide to whether the disappearance is right. The disappearance is right. The relief knows this. The alarm is simply old. What you find in the disappearance is not finished. The self that begins to surface in the quiet is not the completed version. It is the beginning of the version that can only be built from a natural frequency. The relationships that form around the true oscillation are different from the ones that formed around the translated version. They are fewer, slower to arrive, and unmistakably real in a way that connections formed in constant social noise rarely are. The people drawn to your natural frequency do not require you to be legible in the old way. They recognize something more specific, the actual vibration, not the performed approximation of it. And the work, the creative work, the interior work, the work of building a life that actually fits who you are, is only possible at the natural frequency. Every version of that work done in the entrained state is compromised by the degree of the entrainment. Every version done at the natural frequency has a specificity, an authority, a quality of genuine origin that the social translation cannot produce. Not because the work done in company is false, but because the natural frequency is where the real signal lives. The more you disappear from people's lives, the more you find yourself, not as an inspirational promise, as a physical description of what happens when an instrument is allowed to vibrate at its own frequency after years of entrainment to something else. The signal returns, the work becomes possible. The self that was waiting stops waiting. That you already started. Keep it going. If this found you in the middle of the disappearance, write in the comments, I'm finding the signal. Let's see how many of us are returning to ourselves right now. If Nyctivus is new to you, subscribe. Every video here is built for the person who is in the process of returning to their own frequency. The next one continues from exactly where this one ends. Don't stop the return before you see where it leads.